out from at least the first 5 books of Moses. The historical bridge spanning the interval between the Old and the New Testaments, from 400 BC to about 4 or 5 BC. That's what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to pretty much read this to you. I hope I don't bore you to death. At the close of the Old Testament, Israel was found in 2 divisions. The greater number of the Jews are scattered throughout the Persian Empire. Their situation was more of kind of like colonists in these areas than actually slaves. They refused to return to their homeland when the opportunity arose. And remember, only some of them went back. The remnant returned to their land of promise following the decree of Cyrus, permitting them to return to Palestine in Daniel 5:18 and Daniel 9 and verse 24. They were chiefly of the tribe of Judah, the survivors of the priests and the Levites, Genesis 46 and verse 11. The first expedition went back led by Zerubbabel, the prince of the Davidic family. Now, we've studied this pretty much in here, but I want to lead you right up to Matthew, okay? And if you have not got these little charts, you need one today, because we're going to look at this. So, can you have these if they come in? About 80 years later, the second expedition was headed by Ezra. The temple was rebuilt and religious institutions organized. Ezra and Nehemiah institute and leave a settled form of government in Palestine as recorded in the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. A council of elders and priests formed ecclesiastical court that ruled the people. And this is where we get the Sanhedrin court. This is where the Sanhedrin court began. Okay? They interpreted the law and enforced obedience, and they were the great synagogue of the 120 members. They ruled for 150 years until Simon the Just in about 292 BC. They held that the law was given in 2 forms, the written law and the oral law. And remember, this is what Jesus had so much trouble with, the oral law. The oral law was not inspired by God. This is the tradition of the elders. They presumed it was handed down from Moses to Joshua and the elders who outlived them, and to the prophets, and then from Jeremiah and Ezra, who supposedly had given it to the great synagogue. This was what we call the Talmud. Okay. Now Nehemiah gave the body a complete library of the sacred books in 2 Maccabees 2:13. And remember, last week we studied about the books of the Apocrypha, what the Apocrypha is and what the Apocrypha is not. And that's one Bill wanted me to teach over again today. And I said, you have the video and you have the CD, so do it that way. And the same way with this one. I'm not going to teach this class again either. This is it. Okay? The great synagogue originated 613 precepts and the oral traditions which evolved into the Talmud. Christ referred to them as the laws and traditions of men and the doctrines of men and the doctrines of the elders in Matthew 5:21, 27, 31, 33, 38, 43, 15, 2 through 6, and Mark 3:13. All right? So what I'm giving you here today is a foundation for the New Testament. This, what happened in this period of time, greatly affected how Christ related to his people. Politically, the fortunes of the Palestinian Jews, the remnant returned, are linked, and upon the history of the Gentile world powers prophesied in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. The Persian rule was BC 538 to BC 332. The Persians were a brave, witty, impetuous, passionate people, but generous toward others in many ways. The Jews were given a decree of freedom but remained subject to Persia. The high priest was given the freedom to exercise his religious functions, and under this rule the high priest became a powerful political figure in Palestine. We're going to see here how the Herods got set up and everything else. Under Persian rule, Ezra and Nehemiah set up synagogues. Remember, there was a law where 4 or 5 Jews were together. I can't remember how many it was, but if you got that many in some area, they could have a synagogue. Jesus shortened that in the New Testament. He said, where there are 2 or 3 people gathered together as a New Testament church, I will be there with them. Even less than the synagogue. Okay? In many towns for worship and schools and of instruction, the local courts where men were tried for crimes against the state and the society were held in these synagogues. That was a court and a religious church and everything, meeting place. To each synagogue was a body of rulers attached, civil magistrates and ecclesiastical presbyters. During this time, the rival worship was Samaria. Remember when Samaria? Mount Gerizim, where they built a different, and they started worshiping the golden calves again. John 4, 20 through 24. Due to the geographical location of Palestine, it suffered greatly from the Persian-Egyptian wars. It was a battlefield all the time. The Greek rule is from 336 to 204 BC, the period of Alexander the Great. BC 336 to 320. The he-goat of Daniel's vision was advancing from the west to overturn the vast but tottering Medo-Persian Empire. Alexander was the son of Philip of Macedon, who conquered all of Greece and welded it into a united nation and a democracy. That's where we get the word ecclesia from, remember, from the Greek Empire. Ecclesia, iglesia. All right, iglesia in Spanish means what, young ones? Church. All right. At the age of 20 years, Alexander ascended to the throne of his father, BC 336. Within 13 years, he altered human history, thus fulfilling the prophecy of Daniel in the vision of the body, of the thighs, of brass, and picturing the Third World Empire. He spread Hellenistic culture over Egypt and Western Asia. Hellenistic. Hellenistic is the word for Greek, not Greek. Hellis. All right? This new culture widened the horizons of men's minds and thus prepared the way for the coming cosmopolitan creed of Christianity. And also the language which the Bible would be written in. All the Bible would be written in. Old Testament first and New Testament later. A language that is without dispute. The most perfect grammatical language that has ever been created. He became master in a short time over Greek, Asia, Egypt, and Syria. He defeated the Persian Empire in the battle at Arbela. He allowed the Jew to retain self-government and have their own religion. Now remember that. In BC 332, while besieging Tyre, Alexander demanded the submission of the Jews, which they refused. Now remember, God prophesied that he would go against Tyre and Sidon, remember? This is all prophecy. After the fall of Tyre, he marched against Jerusalem to punish the inhabitants for their disobedience. At the news, the high priest Judah prayed to God and was told to lead a procession out to meet Alexander the Great. Seeing this unusual profession, Alexander changes his mind and befriends the Jews and sacrifices on their altar. The Greek language is introduced throughout the ancient world to spread throughout the world. Koine Greek meant what? Universal language is what it was. It was universal language. When Alexander had built the city of Alexandria in Egypt, he invited the Jews to settle there. And here we have the Alexandrian, or the Hellenistic Jews. Which one of them wrote a book in the New Testament? Which book was that? One Hellenistic Jew wrote a book in the New Testament. Beautiful classical Greek. Most perfect language in Greek in the New Testament epistle. The book of Hebrews. All right? The Jews were diffused throughout the empire, and the Old Testament truths were introduced to all of the then known world through the Septuagint. The Septuagint, that's a Greek translation of the Old Testament. It was later, BC 294 and through 289, in this city of Alexandria, that the Old Testament was translated by 72 Jewish scholars into the Greek Septuagint. And remember, what does that mean? 70 are the Septuagint. That's a short form for Septuagint. This paved the way for the coming era of Christianity and the language of the New Testament. period of the Ptolemies, between BC 320 and 204, Daniel had predicted that this great empire of Alexander would break up into 4 parts, remember, from the book of Daniel when we studied the book of Daniel. The great horn would be broken, the 4 smaller horns would take its place. Following Alexander's death, he succumbed to the fever in Babylon in 323. His empire was divided between his 4 generals. Cassander took Greece and Macedonia. Lysimachus took Asia Minor. Seleucus took Syria, Babylon, Persia, Media, and other eastern parts, and Ptolemy took Egypt. By the way, what was Cleopatra? She was basically the queen of Egypt, wasn't she? But what was she?
Ptolemy.
She was Greek. She wasn't Egyptian. She was Greek.
Wasn't she descended from Ptolemy?
Yeah. Yeah, right back, straight back. Most of the 3rd century before Christ was taken up with wars between these rival kings. Judea at this time fell between the anvil and the hammer of Syria and Egypt. It came first under the power of Syria. Later it was taken in battle by Egypt and ruled by the Ptolemaic kings. Ptolemy, Philadelphus, treated the Jews kindly. During his reign, the Septuagint was translated from Hebrew into Greek. All right? But Ptolemy said Philadelphus. What's Philadelphus mean? We get the word Philadelphia from that, don't we? All right? Brotherly love. This opened the Old Testament to all the Greek-speaking world. And the whole world had the Old Testament in their language now. Do you see how God uses different people in different times? During this period, the Syrian monarchy rose. Seleucus, Nicator, and the other Alexandrian generals founded Antioch, which became the western capital of the kingdom. He conquered nearly all of Asia. He was assassinated while campaigning against Macedonia. His grandson, Seleucus II, lost most of what his forebears had gained. Antiochus III was defeated by Ptolemy Philopator, who took again Palestine. Under his rule, the Jews were bitterly persecuted. Remember this now. The Syrian rule, BC 204 to 165. Ptolemy Philopator dies in Palestine, and the whole of Syria is seized by Antiochus. Antiochus. Remember that name, Antiochus. At this time, the land was divided into 5 provinces similar to the New Testament, or familiar in the New Testament. Judea, Samaria, Galilee, Trachonitis, and Perea. Antiochus Epiphanes. Boy, he's a famous figure, isn't he? He is a type of what? Antiochus Epiphanes. Type of what? Come on, you Bible scholars. This is called the Brady Bunch, remember? But what was Antiochus Epiphanes a type of? The Antichrist to come. The Antichrist to come. With the ascension of Antiochus Epiphanes to the throne of Syria, a bitter period for the Jews began. He deposed Onias, the high priest, and the priesthood into the hands of Jason. Antiochus Epiphanes was reportedly killed in Egypt, causing a great rejoicing among the Jews. Reportedly killed. He comes back to Jerusalem, and guess what they're doing? They're celebrating his death. This makes him very mad. Okay? He's real mad. This report proves false, and upon his return to Jerusalem, Antiochus slew 40,000 Jews. 40,000 of them when they were celebrating his death. He profaned the temple by offering a sow on the altar, December the 15th, 168 BC. He erected a statue of Jupiter on the altar of burnt offerings. He compelled the Jews to worship idols. He forbid them the worship of Jehovah. He forced the Jews to eat swine meat, which is what? Not kosher. He burned the scriptures and the Talmud. A great massacre followed, and women and children were sold into slavery all over. The temple was devoted to the worship of the Grecian god Zeus. Circumcision was forbidden under pain of death. The period of Maccabees, 165 to 63 BC. Provoked by the cruelties of Antiochus Epiphanes, the Maccabees revolt. Now remember, we studied a little bit about this, but I want to get you where we are in the book of Matthew. All right? Matthias, the father of 5 sons and priest, was the first of the Maccabees. Sparked by the patriotism and religious ardor of this leader, the Jews gathered around him and the insurrection rapidly spread. At the death of Matthias, his son Judas took control. Attempting to crush the rebellion, Antiochus was soundly defeated in 3 conflicts. Antiochus died of a loathsome disease, Antiochus Epiphanes. Judas Maccabees now became governor of Palestine in BC 165. The true worship of God was reestablished. At what feast do the Jews celebrate? And Jesus celebrated because of this.
Hanukkah.
Basically Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights. Okay? The Feast of Dedication, the Feast of the Temple, the Feast of Lights, the Feast of the Restoration of the Temple were all celebrated because of his defeat and God's conquest over him. The temple was purified and rededicated, and that's where we have that God provided olive oil for the lights in the menorah in the temple. Hostilities erupted again with Syria, and Judas was slain in battle. His brother Jonathan took over but was soon murdered. BC 143, under Jonathan, the civil and the priestly authority was united. Under Jonathan, Simon, John Heraclius, and a Hasmonean line of priest rulers was established by treaty with Rome. From this time forward, worldly men sought the office of high priest for political gain. Why was Jesus crucified? Because he was taking the power of religion from the political power from them, ignoring the teachings of the Old Testament. Now the command fell to his brother Simon, who appealed to Rome and was placed in a position of authority. He was succeeded by his son John Hyrcanus. At the time of John Hyrcanus' succession to the throne, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the 2 major parties in power, were located in bitter opposition. I hope this is meaning something to you. I'm giving you a lot of information real fast. But then you will understand the New Testament better. Okay? The grandson of John Hyrcanus, Aristobulus, later bitterly disputed the claims of one another to the leadership, which brought about a civil war in Judea. Now you can read about this in Josephus' history also. To settle the differences, the claims were brought before Pompey, the Roman general. He favored the side of Heraclius. Aristobulus was unwilling to submit to this ruling and entered into a conflict with Pompey. Pompey took the city of Jerusalem and appointed Hyrcanus governor. The period of the Romans, BC 63, and now this is where we go. BC 63, Rome came into possession of Palestine. Julius Caesar, Pompey, Crassus formed the first triumvirate. In BC 47, Julius Caesar gave Hyrcanus and his heirs all rights to the high priesthood and to the right to appeal to Caesar for all the Jews. They were exempted of paying tribute every 7th year, the sabbatical year, for the neither sowed nor reaped in that year. They received freedom from military service. They were given the right to meet and assemble together according to their own customs, laws. They enjoyed full religious and political freedom. Antipater, remember this name, Antipater, was appointed procurator in the same year by Julius Caesar. Herod, the son of Antipater, was appointed governor of Galilee at the same time. And guess what? Now we have on the throne of Israel what? A son of Esau and not a son of Israel. All these things were ratified by the Roman Senate in 44 BC. For maintenance of order and general political government, a Roman official presided over all Syria. When Caesar was assassinated in Syria, he passed into the hands of Antony. Antony and Cleopatra, remember that? He made Herod king, who married Miriam, the granddaughter of Hyrcanus. Herod, in turn, appoints his wife's brother, Aristobulus III, high priest. Here's where we are now. BC 37, Herod the Great, the same one who was king at the time of birth of Christ, disposed of the last Hasmonean prince, Antigonus. Thus he established himself as the only aspirant to the throne. Still fearful of the remainder of the Maccabean family, he decided to destroy the whole family completely. He murdered his first wife's brother, then Hyrcanus, then even his wife Miriam. Under his wicked rule, the people became rebellious and hard against the Romans, and mutual hatred developed. Being in constant fear, Herod betrayed his own people to the Romans. He fostered immorality against which John the Baptist spoke out. You know, he was married to his brother's wife. Okay, he took his brother's wife, and John the Baptist spoke out against it. It was more immorality. He cultivated alien customs. He encouraged mistrust. He corrupted the priesthood. He massacred many nobles. During his period, the Pharisees, the scribes, and lawyers became more esteemed than the priests and the Levites. From the much confusion and controversy among the people and the ruling classes emerged the two sects, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, as powerful political factions. Being in fear of the people, because of the conditions brought by his godless ruler, he promised them a new temple of great magnificence. In what way is Herod the Great like the Antichrist? The Antichrist is going to build them a temple. They're looking for the temple. The second temple, at this time 500 years old, he appointed 1,000 priests to oversee the work. And of course these priests were what? Politicians rather than priests. After 10 years, the temple was dedicated and used, even though the work continued for several years afterwards. Still afraid to lose his throne, Herod kills his two sons. Hearing that the king of the Jews was born, he murdered all the infants in Bethlehem. Thus he thought he might destroy the new king, Jesus Christ. Joseph flees to Egypt with the mother and child. Herod dies, and Jesus Christ is brought back to Palestine by Joseph. All right? We're almost there in the New Testament, aren't we? We're almost there. Was this worth it? Did you get something from this? All right. The Gospels, the 4 Gospels. Now get your little paper out here, okay? All right, the little paper. We've had this up on the website for several years now. I have never seen a chart like this before. And I drew it out by hand. How many of you remember when I drew this by hand about 10 or 15 years ago? All right. And then Ken Glenn, since he's a computer genius, he got on the computer and did this chart for me. He took all the material I had and drew this. All right. Now let's see what it's talking about here. Any of you need one of these? I think you two need one. Brother Abe. Oh, you've got one? Okay. Do you have one, young lady? Oh, you want one on your own? Okay. You can write notes down. Okay. Now remember, all of the 12 tribes of Israel were Jacob's sons, weren't they? They were Jacob's sons. All right? Now, each division of these tribes, in the north we have Asher, Dan, and Naphtali, all right? In the north. And under their flag, there was a flag that flew over that area. Now look here, you can see there's the altar, the brazen laver, and the tabernacle in the middle, okay? Kind of upside down. But we see that on the east is a flag with what on it? A lion. Guess what tribe would be under that? Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. All right? And by the way, these are Leah's kids. And the north were Bilhah and Zilpah's kids. And then go to the west now. These are Rachel's children. And that is what? What flag is that? What flag is? What's on that flag, that yellow flag? A calf. All right? And Manasseh, Ephraim, and Benjamin. Now down to the south, we have another flag, and what's it got on it? The face of the head of what? A man. All right. Simeon, Reuben, and Gad. That's Leah and Zilpah's children, the Kohathites. All right? Now, let's think about it. How many Gospels do we have? How many Gospels do we have?
4.
4. All right? How many flags do you have?
4.
Let's just think about it for a minute. We got 4 flags and we got 4 Gospels. All right? Katamathion. The Gospel according to Matthew is the first one we're going to study, isn't it? Huh? That's the first one we're going to study. Hello, Brother John. Matthew. All right, which one do you think Matthew is? Huh? The king. All right, the king. Which one would that be? Huh?
The red?
The lion. The lion of the tribe of Judah, okay? The lion of the tribe of Judah. This is where the kingly heirship of Jesus comes from. All right? Let me tell you a little bit more before we go into this. The term gospel means what?
Good news.
Good news. All right? Good news. Or good message. Or God's message. Now, how many of you ever heard of the synoptics? Synoptics. Synoptics. This is 2 Greek words. All right? Seen means what? Seen means what? Together. You Greek scholars, together. Seen. Symphony. Symphony means what? Sound together. When you have a symphony, the sounds are together, okay? Synoptics, it means you see together. All right, when you have optical, you go down to the optician to get your eyeglasses or whatever. You go down and get your eyeglasses. It means to see together. There are 3 what we call synoptics. What are the synoptics? Gospels. Matthew. Mark. No. John is not a synoptic. John just takes off on his own. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the synoptics. They see things together. They're parallel. But John just brings out one period of time, one thing about Jesus that's different than all the rest. Matter of fact, John was the last gospel written, and John, according to Polycarp, said he wasn't going to write a gospel, but it so impressed upon him that as the time went along, that people began to think that Jesus was not divine, that he wasn't God, that he wasn't Jehovah. So John, right off in the Gospel according to John, in the first verse, he says what? That Jesus is Jehovah God, period. Zilch, that's it. Settled. That's who he is. All right. What gospel would John correspond to in the flags? Where did Jesus come from?
Man.
Where did Jesus come from? Heaven. All right. He's a God who came down from heaven. All right. No one descended from heaven except him. He came down from heaven. All right. So we have, in north, we have what? The eagle. That's John's gospel. So write down John. Over here on the right, write down Matthew. All right. Matthew on the right. That's the king. And up we have John. And then, what else do we have? How about Luke? How did Luke look at Jesus? Huh? The Son of Man. Right down at the bottom, Luke. All right? And then, according to Mark, how did Mark look at Jesus?
As a sacrificial lamb.
What?
Sacrificial lamb. Calf.
Well,
The red,
servant.
the red hammer.
The servant. The servant. All right? So the servant is Mark. So now we have Mark, Matthew, well, we have John, we have Matthew, we have Luke, and we have Mark under these 4 flags, just like they flew there. We have, in the book of Daniel, in the book of Ezekiel, in the book of Revelation, we have 4 beasts. What are they? The The same as these. The same as these. All right. Now let's go to the book of Matthew. The book of Matthew. Katamathion in Greek. Book of Matthew. Now we have the Old Testament in Greek. We have the New Testament that's going to be written in Greek. And by the way, Matthew was written somewhere between 40 and 70 AD, they think. That's a wide margin, but it's somewhere in there. Right? In the book of Matthew, we have the genealogy of Jesus as the King of Israel, who was supposed to be on the throne of Israel and not Herod, not Esau's descendant. Isn't that weird how the old devil never lays down at all? Never. Who was the son of the flesh? Who was the rat? Who was he? Who was he? Esau. All right, Esau was the rat. Remember, he was the one that was just absolutely devoid of any spiritual activity in his cranium at all. Period. Nothing. A man of the flesh. Everything he did was according to the flesh. And even old, what was his father's name? Isaac. Isaac was his father. And his father so loved that boy that he was going to put him as the spiritual head of his family no matter what God thought. God had to blind that old guy so he couldn't figure out which boy he was blessing. So he had put the right one. He would have blessed Esau people, and the wrong man would have been on the throne. And he knew who God wanted on the throne. The heir in Joseph's line is in the book of Matthew. Whose line is in Luke? Mary's line. In Matthew we have Joseph's line as the heir of the throne. And in Luke, we have Mary's line as the son of man, don't we? The son of man. And how did Enoch, what did he call the promised Messiah? They called him an unusual term, didn't he, in the book of Enoch? What did he call the heir that was going to come? What did he call the Messiah? What did Enoch call the Messiah? Remember, we've talked about this before. The son of woman. The son of woman. Son of woman. Because Genesis 3:15 says what? That the Messiah will come through the woman and not the man. That's why Jesus could be born without sin, because he did not have an earthly father. He had an earthly mother. He was related to us through Mary, but he was not related to us through the man. Where is sin passed on in the human race? How is sin passed on?
Man.
Through man. All right, not through woman, through man. All right. Matthew means gift of God. He was called Matthew Levi. He was a Jew that had betrayed his people because he became what was his profession. What was Matthew Levi's profession? I worked for the IRS. I was single most of my life. I went to the gym one time and would go swimming and go in the steam room. I really didn't need to work out. I was in really perfect condition. I was strong. But I'd go in there to go in the steam room and swim in the swimming pool and stuff like that. And this girl came up one time with wanting to date me. And she was talking to me and everything else, and pretty soon I asked her what she did. And she kind of blushed and acted like, oh boy, what does this woman do? What is she, in a crime or something? Finally, after about 15 or 20 minutes, she told me she worked for the IRS. She said, when I tell people that, they don't want to ever see me again. Well, here we have an IRS agent right in the midst. Okay, we have an IRS agent right here. And you have to remember, like all politics, if you got a politician up there, you got somebody that's corrupt. Simple as that. They're already tainted. Okay, period. we have politicians. Now the tax collectors, how they got their money was that they charged more than the people earned or owned for taxes. And it was just basically up to the tax collector how he ripped off the people. They owed so many taxes, but his wages were out of the extra taxes, so he could double the taxes, he could triple the taxes, he could quadruple the taxes, whatever he wanted. He could make them 100 times more. He could take their property, and he would become a very rich man. You will look into Bakersfield, and a lot of the lawyers in Bakersfield, they got rich by pilfering people down at the courthouse. Most of them got a lot of property because they took possession of people's property when they were defending them, so-called in the courts. Corruption. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. To Abraham was born Isaac, and to Isaac Jacob, and to Jacob Judah and his brothers, and to Judah was born Perez. Perez. Let's think about Perez for a while. And Zerah by Tamar. Perez. What was Perez? Who was that? Just think about this for a while. Who was Perez? By Tamar. Tamar was married to one of Judah's children, boys. He died. And she tried, and one of his brothers was supposed to marry her. Remember? That's what the law said. But she was afraid. Well, he said, maybe if my son died because he was married to this woman, maybe this woman's evil, so I won't give her to anybody. And she hangs around for a long time, and she's very faithful. She doesn't fool around with anybody else. She's waiting to marry one of the sons. He's waiting till he get older and older and older. And finally, all this takes place over years. And he never gives her marriage. Judah's a little bit wild guy. You know, he's kind of like Sam Paul, my great-great-grandfather. He runs around with a dark, shady character, you know, the women of the night. And Judah was like that. He was like that. All right? So Tamar goes out there and she puts on a clothing like a prostitute and stops him on the side of the road. And he says, well, I want to be with you, you know. And what are you going to pay me? I don't have any money with me, but I'll bring it back. He said, what are you going to give me for it? Give me your staff, which gave his genealogy on it, by the way. And his signet ring, which told who he was. And then I'll send you a calf or a goat or whatever you want, you know, later on. Well, he fooled around, took off, and sent one of his servants back with a goat or the calf or whatever it was, and he couldn't find the woman. Later on, she became pregnant. She shows up pregnant, and she says, oh, she's played the harlot. He said, I'm going to kill her. We're going to stone her. We're going to kill her. And then he goes to her and said, whose child are you bearing with? And she said, well, the one that owns this staff right here and the signet ring. And this child is in the lineage of the Messiah. And to Perez was born Hezron, and Hezron Ram, and Ram was born Amminadab, and Amminadab was born Nashalon, and Nashalon Salmon, and Salmon was born Boaz by Rahab. Boaz by Rahab. Who's Rahab now? Huh? Who's Rahab?
She's from Jericho, isn't she?
She's from Jericho. She's a prostitute, another prostitute. All right? Except she really is a prostitute. The other one played like she was a prostitute so she could get pregnant to have a child to carry on the seed. And Judah was not honest enough to do this, and so he ended up, this is the Messiah's child. Okay? We have Rahab by Boaz. Rahab the harlot. And she's one of these Palestinians. She's one of these Canaanites, isn't she? And to Boaz was born Obed by Ruth. And Ruth is what? Ruth the what in the Bible? Moabite. What does Moab mean? What does Moab mean?
Father's water.
Water or semen from the father. That's what that woman named him. These are who? Come on, who? Lot. Lot. Lot the louse. Remember the one that hung around? He was a judge and the lawyer that hung around Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, one of his kids. Well, all of this shows you one thing, that God can save anybody. And God can use anybody, even prostitutes and harlots and rats and everything else. There's hope for everybody, okay? And these are in the lineage of the heir of the throne of Israel. Obed, Ruthie, and Obed, Jesse. And Jesse was born David the king. And to David born Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Now God even forgave that ungodliness, didn't he? David had Uriah killed. And that wasn't a fly-by-night thing either. David had known Uriah the Hittite for a long time. By the way, Uriah the Hittite is of Asian origin. The Hittites were Asian. And to Solomon was born Rehoboam, and to Rehoboam was born Abijah, and to Abijah born Asa, and Asa was born Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat was born Joram, and Joram Uzziah, and Uzziah was born Jotham, and Jotham Ahaz, and Ahaz Hezekiah, and Hezekiah was born Manasseh, and Manasseh was born Ammon, and Ammon Josiah. And Josiah was born Jeconiah. Now remember, there was a curse here, wasn't there? Now this is the legal heir, but this line was cursed. We're going to find out in marriage goes around this one. Okay? And his brothers at the time of the deportation of Babylon. And after the deportation of Babylon to Jeconiah was born Shealtiel, and Shealtiel was Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel was born Abihud, and Abihud Eliakim, Azor, and Azor was born Zadok, Achim, and Achim Eliud. Eliud was born Eliezer, Mathan, and Mathan Jacob, and Jacob was born Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom was born Jesus, who is called Messiah, or Christos. Therefore all the generations, in verse 17, from Abraham to David is 14 generations, and from David to the deportation of Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation of Babylon to the time of Christ, 14 generations. Now the birth of Jesus Christ was as follows. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they were married, domnos is what it means, come together in marriage, she was found to be with child by the Holy Spirit. Now, Mary, what does Mary mean? It comes from Mara in Hebrew. What does Mary mean? What does the name mean? Bitter. Thank you, brother. Bitter. All right. Because when she saw her son on the cross of Calvary, it was going to be bitter in her heart. But that was the price. Jesus, when he died on the cross, I can guarantee you the Father and the Spirit felt that pain of the cross. They felt the pain of the cross, the bitterness of it. Now Mary would bring forth a child. It says, this is the lineage of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. This is the legal heir to the throne. The other one, we're going to see the physical heir, and it goes back to, not only it goes back to Abraham, but where does it go back to? The next one over there in Luke. Adam, the Son of God. God created him in his image. He created him. And how in his image? In his shadow casting likeness, in his blood flowing likeness, and in what? His spiritual likeness, his triune likeness. And Joseph, her husband, being a righteous man, and not wanting to disgrace her, desired to divorce her secretly, because she should have been stoned, according to the law. So he's going to put her away secretly. He's not going to kill her. But when he had considered, when he had put this together in his head, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. Now, we've talked about angels, haven't we? What angel do you think appeared to her? Which one is over the communication realm of God? What archangel? This is the archangel. Okay, what we call the archangel. Which one?
Michael? No, Gabriel.
Gabriel. All right, Gabriel. Saying, Joseph, son of David, be not afraid to take Mary, as your wife. For that which has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And she will bear a son, and you shall call his name Joshua. Joshua. In the New Testament, after the King James, it's Jesus, all right? It's Jesus in Greek. Yes, Brother A.
Phillips. In Genesis, people can meet God directly.
They what?
In real world, they can meet, they can see the God
Yes.
in real world.
They saw Jehovah.
Yeah, but in here, Mary saw the angel,
The angel here is Gabriel.
in her dream,
Yeah. In
not real
her,
world.
yeah. In a dream.
Yeah.
And here in a dream. And what is the word in Greek for dream? Or how did God, what did God do to Adam in the garden in the Septuagint? What? Hypnose is the word. All right. God appeared to them in a dream. He hypnotized them is the word. So we get the word hypnosis. The medical term is hypnosis. God revealed messages to them through hypnosis. Hypnose. Right? And she shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Joshua, or Jesus. And what does Joshua or Jesus mean? What's the name? What does Joshua in the Hebrew mean? You got Jehovah in it, doesn't it? He who shall become. All right. For he will save his people from the sins. Jehovah means he who shall become. Joshua means what? Come on. Joshua means what? Huh? Jehovah saves. All right. And now all this took place that was spoken of by the Lord through the prophet that might be fulfilled, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with a child, and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name what? Emmanuel. And what does Emmanuel mean? From Im and El in Hebrew. God with his people. God with his people. God among his people. All right. Which translates God with us. And Joseph arose. I'll turn this old machine over. And Joseph arose from his hypnosis, his sleep, his dream. And he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. And he took her as his wife. Now he goes ahead and starts living with her. But he doesn't take her, literally, he does not have sex with her, which is a seal of marriage, okay? And kept her a Parthenos. 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 And there's two Hebrew words and a Greek word for, the Greek word for virgin is Parthenos. Parthenos. All right? That means she has completely been set apart and separated and watched to make sure that she is a virgin. This woman is a virgin. Now there's two words in Hebrew for virgin. One of them really means a virgin. The other one means a sexually mature woman. What are the two words? You remember, Randall? Remember what those two words are? Huh? One of them comes from house. One of them comes from house, Bethulah. Bethulah. Bethulah means one that's, again, guarded in the house and watched over. Bethulah. That means virgin. That's the absolute virgin. What's the other one for sometimes translated virgin? Alma. Alma. Alma and Bethulah. Bethulah means guarded in the house. Alma means a sexually mature woman. Now she can be a virgin or whatever, but she's sexually mature. Right? Verse number 25, and kept her a virgin till she gave birth to a son. And she called his name Joshua or Jesus. The second chapter. The second chapter of Matthew. Now after Jesus was born, where? Bethlehem. Why was Jesus born in Bethlehem? Why was he born in Bethlehem? Because Caesar, remember we just studied earlier that Caesar took over, Rome took over, and he wanted all the Jews to go back to their native town where they were born so he could take a census of them and find out how many there were that they were going to rule over according to taxes and everything else. So where was Joseph and Mary living before? Where was their regular town where they lived? Where did they normally live? Nazareth. Nazareth comes from the word Nazar. Nazar means what? Root. In Hebrew it means root. He would be a root out of dry ground, it says. Root. And then Joseph and Mary had to travel all the way from Nazareth down to Bethlehem. And Bethlehem means what? Here we get the word Beth again. Beth means what? Bread. House of bread. A house of food. Which was where David lived. This Bethlehem is a village of David. Okay? That's where his family lived. And that's where Boaz met Ruth, is out here in Bethlehem. That's where Jesus was born, and out in that field after it had been harvested is where they would take the sacrificial sheep, the sheep that were going to be sacrificed, and special shepherds would watch them, and that's when the angels appeared to them and heard the angels singing and everything, and they went and worshiped Jesus also. All right. It was from all of this area here, Bethlehem. All right. Now I was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Herod the king, and Herod is who? Esau's descendant. An impostor. Behold the magistrates. Magis comes from magos. We get the word magistrate from that. What is a magistrate? What is a magistrate?
Does it have to do with law?
Somebody has to do with, they were rulers.
Rules?
All right. In ancient Persia and Babylonia, when Daniel was taken over into Babylonia, they say that he founded a school of magi or rulers. He was basically the head magi over them. That's what Daniel was, the head magi. And all the way down from the period of time that Daniel was there, he had told them when the Messiah was going to be born, when he would ride into Jerusalem on the donkey. All of this was history. And they knew the period of time when the Messiah was going to be born. So they went looking for him. It was the time of the stars. And many people believe that there was a star also that shone. Matter of fact, I showed you a movie called The Star of Bethlehem, remember? Where the stars lined up and shone really bright. These magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem saying, where in Jerusalem now, where is the capital? Where is the palace in the land of Israel? Where is the palace? It's in Jerusalem. All right, that's where the king lives, isn't it? In Jerusalem. Where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. And when Herod the king heard it, he was what? Troubled. And all Jerusalem with him. I should have brought that book from the Arco volume and read you his words that he wrote to Caesar, why he killed all these babies. And gathering together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he began to inquire. Actually, it says in Greek that he kept on interrogating them. He kept on interrogating them where the Christ was to be born. All the chief priests and the scribes. Did they know where Jesus was supposed to be born? What did the Bible say? Oh, Bethlehem, if you're faithful. All right. And they said, Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem of Judea, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for out of you shall become forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. shepherd. What is the word for shepherd in Hebrew? What is the word for shepherd? Did God ever appear in the Old Testament as the shepherd of any individuals? Jehovah, did he ever appear to anyone as Jehovah Roeh? Jehovah Roeh.
David called him shepherd.
David called him shepherd, Psalm 23, that was his idea of heaven. In Genesis 22, Jehovah appeared to Abraham and said he was Jehovah Roeh, Jehovah the shepherd, or the one that will provide. God, Jehovah, appeared to Hagar, and she called him Jehovah Roeh, the Lord my shepherd. All right? He shall shepherd his people, Israel. And verse number 7, then Herod secretly called the Magi and ascertained from them the time the star appeared. When did the star start shining? Okay? And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and make careful search for the child. And when you have found him, report to me that I may come and worship him also. And having heard the king, they went their way. And behold, the star, which they had seen in the east, went on before them until it came time and stood over where the child was. And they saw the star, and they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And they came into the house and saw the child with Mary his mother. Now they came into a house. Now evidently they have rented a house over here. This child may have been how old at this period of time? According to some theologians and Bible students. Approximately 2 years old. David brought a little girl out there that was just about this age almost the other day in my house. She walked into that house and she started having a wall-eyed conniption fit.
Terrible twos.
She was scared. She thought she was going to get dumped off there, and she didn't know me. She didn't know Carolyn. Boy, she started crying. She didn't want to leave. She said, and pointed to that truck. Let's get out of here. I'm not staying here. I want to go. And when she turned her loose, she went with her little feet, boy, right out there and pointed to that car, and she was ready to get in that car. You wasn't going to be left there with Wilbur. They came into the house and saw the child, not in the stable, but in the house, with Mary his mother, and they fell down and they worshipped. And opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now, how many of these dudes were there? I don't know. There's 3 gifts. They say maybe there was 3 of them. Maybe there was 100. There may have been 300. However many, there's an entourage. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Verse number 13 now. Now, if you bring next week, if you bring your Old and New Testament survey that I wrote, I gave this to you quite a while, you'll find the subjects. When I went to the seminary, a long time ago, 40 years ago, there weren't very many study Bibles that broke the Bible down by subjects. So I wrote an Old and a New Testament survey because I had to do that. That was part of my homework. In Matthew 1 through 17, we have the genealogy of Jesus the King. From 1:18, we have the birth of Jesus Christ the King, 1:18 through 25. And his infancy in obscurity in 2:1 through 23. That's the subjects that we're talking about. Bible by subjects, okay? Now verse number 13. Verse number 13, the appearance of the angel and the flight into Egypt. Now the Bible even prophesied that this was going to happen, didn't it? And now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Again, how is it? Hypnose. Hypnose. Remember that, hypnose. We've got hypnosis today. We know for thousands of years people have used hypnosis to treat diseases and all kinds of things among people. But also hypnosis can be very bad. Hypnose. Let's just look at that for a moment, just parenthetically, okay? How many of you ever listened to commercials on television?
Everyone.
Do you ever hear them repeating over and over and over the same thing?
The 1-800 number.
And then they start also counting 10. And they'll say 9, 8, 7, 6. That is hypnosis, people. You are being hypnotized to buy their products, whether you realize it or not. How about subliminal advertisements? Subliminal advertisements.
The
You ever heard of
government
that?
stopped that. The government put a stop
The
to
government's
that.
still doing it. We got talk radio today. All of this stuff is hypnosis. And if you tell somebody something long enough, they'll think it is a fact, won't they? In the theaters, a long time ago, in the movie theaters, they had subliminal advertisement, which was hypnosis. You're acquainted with it. What happened?
Banned
They
it.
what?
They banned it. They caused people to want to buy products from the.
And what they would do is they take just a
Pictures.
frame, and you would not see this, but in your subconscious, subliminal mind, in your subconscious mind, you would see an ice cream cone, or bonbons, or popcorn, or Coke. There's one frame within there, and your mind would register this, and you'd go buy it. That's what you call hypnosis speaking. That's hypnosis. When you go to these hot shot used car dealers and car dealers and things like that, get ready for hypnosis. When you go to lawyers, when you get into court and you got a lawyer up there just repeating the same thing over and over and over again, that's hypnosis, people. Hypnosis. Watch out. Watch out on all television programs. Every commercial. Be aware. Be aware. I just thought I'd throw that one in there for good measure. Okay, we're about to the end of it. And the child and his mother flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt. Hosea 11 and verse 1 is the one where he tells this. And was there until the death of Herod, that was spoken by the Lord to the prophet that might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I shall call my son, Hosea 11 and verse 1. All right. And that's where we're going to start next week. All right. I hope I didn't bore you to death with all these facts today. But I hope it gave you a foundation for the New Testament. Yeah. I hope it gave you a foundation for the New Testament. We're going to study the 4 Gospels, and we're going to relate each one of them. We're going to go to each one and separately study them, and I'm going to try to cover them thoroughly, but not as deep as I do in my Greek classes. In Greek, you study every word. All right, every word. Okay, Brother David.
I'm here.
Sick 'em. Go out and do something eternal, by the way.
Okay, on our prayer list today, Emma would like us to pray for guidance for all her children.